Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of, I still want to say Shadowverse, but I guess this is Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Masters and video game news. I've updated Open Broadcast software, probably stupidly, because I did it the instant they announced a new version, and now they're announcing that some small percentage, or some percentage, of people are having a lockup issue. Hopefully that won't be an issue for me. But one thing I will say is they have added a new profile pull down menu next to the scene pull down menu. So when I switch between live stream and recording games, the recordings, I switch scenes. Live streaming is a lot more complicated. It has a whole bunch more tricks and things set up, and it just keeps it nice to have two different scenes. So I went to switch back from the solo recording of just pre-recorded video game to the live stream scene, and I couldn't find it. And I'm like, oh no, they deleted my files. This is a big mistake. And then I finally realized that I was just muscle memory pulling down the profile menu, which would have been where the scene menu was before, and they had moved the scene menu to the right. This is kind of a great example in user interface programming that people don't get right. Sometimes you never move where something is. Them adding profile is fine, but it kind of has to be at the end of the list. Even though it's would feel like it would be alphabetical, it's not true, because the top pull downs have never been alphabetical. It's file, then edit, then view, then docs, then it should be scene select, scene collection, and for me then it would be tools and StreamFX, which is extra. So StreamFX is a plugin, so I could see why that might not be at the very end, but at that point it should be profile, and then always at the end is help. That way you just have that consistency as far as windows and user interfaces. Never move a button. That's just going to cause retraining and muscle memory issues. We have yet another muscle maintenance issue here. So they're still working on it. Let's see what has been updated most recently here, February 2nd. They said they were planning on updating the season. And yet they seemingly haven't put any new data here. They've just repushed the same old information. Well, I guess this isn't new. It just has blue update. It's another user interface issue of like, oh, I'm supposed to be looking here at the red circle instead of the blue update. Anyways, let's see. Shop item updates. Yeah. So we may be in a bad position here where if the shop is going to change and something like this is going to go away, or they're just going to throw out a whole bunch more of this garbage stuff to buy, I definitely wouldn't have the currency for that. It's just not gonna happen. I guess one thing we can sit on and be happy about is we have nearly 100 of these. So at the very least we can get 200 random cards in the next expansion and do a decent amount of card pack opening from this collection. It is, I suppose, somewhat questionable since this isn't all the cards. This could be just... Are there no new normal cards? There are some normal cards here still. These are legendary ones. Legendary cards, very recognizable cards, I suppose, is what these are. As far as legacy packs, so we can at least do that. Let's come in here and make sure we've got everything new. We again need to duel in solo mode. I didn't get anywhere dueling in solo mode before, and sometimes when I'm just playing off screen, I'll just take these rewards too. It's gonna, if they don't update the rewards fairly quickly, there is gonna be this problem where you, where I'm gonna max out as a free-to-player or even as a pay-to-player to the point where the game is just gonna dry up. And that might be a lot of what's wrong with that very popular Asian RPG game, what is it called, Lost Ark or something, that came out. Is that after a couple of days, people in the West in particular, not used to playing the grindy nature of those types of MMORPGs, just ran out of steam and realized that it was just not the kind of experience that Westerners have been trained to want. It is kind of odd that they've added in the notices there a advertisement for the Ash Blossom collection of card packs, because that was not there to my memory before. Okay, for the accountability section, I played a little bit of Fallout 3. Going 3 hours to make one episode of Fallout 3, well, I do think that is the right way, because otherwise it's just going to flood my channel for over the course of a year with Fallout 3 content. It is basically the equivalent of making 3 or 4 shorter episodes, which, a different type of game, I definitely would be trying to make 30-minute, 45-minute episodes. Not that I think anything's going to particularly help YouTube people want to watch the YouTube algorithm actually recommend videos to new people, or more people watch the episodes all the way through. So yeah, it definitely does feel like the pit, as I really did just do one thing and then the power just flickered in my house, but for a second. But that was when the air conditioner also just came on, so hopefully that's not too big of a deal. Yeah, this advertisement I think is new. And then this is the same old survey. I feel like the pit is written and made by a different team. It definitely feels like it is as far as Fallout 3. And they did put a bit of a twist in it, in which they actually, for the first time in the game, show a baby in the entire game. And then it is only a slight surprise, and frankly it shouldn't have been that big of a surprise. It should have been revealed that the cure, as they were calling it, was a baby a little bit earlier, or hinted at least, so you really had to think about your choice. Whereas the way it is done, you walk in a room, you see a baby, you're told the baby is the cure, and then you have nothing else to do, so it's either you kidnap the baby or you don't. And I'm not 100% sure if there's a real need for the to kidnap the baby in the storyline at all, because it may just be the case that if people escaped and left the Pittsburgh area, they would stop being infected by this disease. But so yeah, it's not making it particularly easy to follow and understand, or much of a moral decision. And for me, I mean, you'd already spent about 3 hours seeing how the people that have the baby are enslaving people for their own desire to rebuild civilization. They're not only enslaving them, but causing them to get sick, and having them live in a place that sterilizes them so they can't, or they have a very low chance of having a baby. So, like, there's just an incredible amount of selfishness on the bad guy's side, as it were, and maybe a little bit of evilness in the idea that you're going to kidnap this baby and potentially torture it and dissect it for the cure to free hundreds of other people who've been enslaved. And the theme of slavery certainly should be touched upon, if it's going to be touched upon, in Fallout 3. It comes up several different times in several different ways, and it never has any like other commingling vices or elements with it. So you end up in 3 different scenarios, having probably 3 different teams write 3 different of the very similar stories, really just wrapping it up with slavery is bad. If you want to be the bad guy, you join the slavers. If you want to be the good guy, you kill the slavers. It's just an immediate death sentence for the slavers. There's really no other element there. Interesting card. I don't think I've seen this before. Yeah, I was thinking how even the Metal Reflect Slime is a pretty great card. I didn't realize that they had expanded on that to something even better. So yeah, there's no big moral choice to it, really. As much as it should be. There is oddly in the pit and every other time there's been slavery in it, there's no invocation of racism really around the slavery. So the main slave master in the pit is dark-skinned African-American person, and this is set like in 2277 or so. So like the idea of a system like this being acceptable in people's minds and people going along with it probably falls apart when you can't make some kind of argument of superiority. Like there had to be a lot of sophistry, a lot of racism, even in the Deep South in the United States, to maintain enough support for it. Because remember, the large majority of citizens in the Deep South were not plantation owners, not rich people that had slaves, so they barely had a dog in the fight. It's not too different from poor people parroting the same pro-rich people propaganda that you often see nowadays. But Fallout 3 just doesn't touch upon any of that. So you have this guy that's saying, well, we're gonna enslave these people and cause them great harm right now for my own vanity to build a civilization in a place that is literally toxic, radiated, when they could have just moved. Frankly, it's not like the Capital Wasteland is not a huge wasteland where you could have built another megaton anywhere you wanted. Yeah. And I suppose I have said in the past, while playing Fallout 3, that yes, at some level, if you were going to bring back civilization, there would be this desire to bring it back to its heyday. That's just not reasonable, for even if you could enslave everyone around you. If, like the events of Fallout 3 happened and a large society was nuked back into the cave ages, you would have to get back to, like, probably living in huts, teepees, log cabins, farming. You're not going to just be able to recover in Fallout 3. It's called the gag. You're not just going to be able to use some kind of magical amount of technology or robots to rebuild all of society. The idea of tearing down crumbled, bombed out steel buildings and being able to reprocess all the elements that made a steel building into a new steel building is just not realistic. And in a lot of ways, it's probably not the way to go anyways. I just watched a Keanu Reeves remake of the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still, and one of the things that happens at the end of that movie, spoiler for a movie that's not that good and people probably won't watch, is that all of society and technology is just shut down. And, like, yeah, that probably would be better. Like, as much as I would hate video games disappearing or computers disappearing, for drastically reducing carbon footprint, getting rid of cars, which are always been a nightmare. Going back to an old style of living would be very hard, certainly for many people, including myself, but probably would be better for the planet and the human race. Just take things a little bit slower. But yeah, I would have been done with the pit, actually, if I hadn't spent an entire hour running around the steel mill trying to find the last remaining steel ingot. There's 100 steel ingots in this area that is a hide and seek, which is, it's too many. If they had split the steel ingots into 50 being in the steel yard and then 50 being in an area called Uptown, that would have worked a lot better. But there was just one, and I kept walking by it. I walked by it about 5 different times without seeing it because they're just not visually outstanding. There's actually a mod I found out about that would make them irradiated and glow, which would have been way helpful. And if anything, Fallout 3 Game of the Year Edition on Steam highlights that Bethesda has really failed to do anything with making an engine that can be so easily modded. And if anything, Bethesda is the poster child of where if you make a game that can have a lot of mods, the company probably isn't going to do anything with it. Or they're going to try and use it just to be greedy and take people's money with like a marketplace. Minecraft is kind of the same way. Minecraft has taken maybe a few ideas and put their own twist on it as far as what they've seen in mods, but the vast majority of the modded content in Minecraft is still really only accessible as modded content in Java. Minecraft has a delicate tight wire to walk, certainly. They don't want to get super complicated, and most mods, the most Feed the Beast style mods would just not be acceptable. Or realistic even. But yeah, Bethesda's been the worst. There definitely is content in the idea of taking simple things, simple tweaks, like having the steel ingots glow, and putting that into the main game. Particularly decades later, it's like, just have a new version and an old version. One of the things that is also, I think, worth mentioning is that the Cyberpunk version 1.5 has been announced or is coming out, and as part of that, they have drastically reduced the amount of just junk in the game, or at least that's what they claim they have done, to make people just kind of slow down and not have that. I heard somebody describe it as a goblin inside of gamers, which is an interesting way to describe it, that obsessive collectathon. Fallout 3 is kind of a great example of a game that does very poor job as far as having any kind of limitations on the amount of junk that you can get. And I'm at a point, particularly if you do the pit. The pit is a kind of great place to get bobby pins for lockpicking. So I probably walked into the pit with like 18 bobby pins, and I'm at like 47 now. And there really isn't a lot of places to even lockpick. Plus my lockpick skill's at 100, so I can just force locks and not care if I break them. Because I'm already at max level 2 and I'm not getting any XP. So yeah, if you are halfway through, if you're at like level 15 to 20 and you went and did the pit DLC, that might be a nice little boost. But it kind of makes some sense to me to still do everything after the main story and just rush through the main story and not do a lot of the locations in the overworld. That way, after I do the pit DLC, I could have come back to the overworld and just goofed around for a while and taken a little bit of a break, but that's not really how it's gonna play, because there's literally nothing to do in the overworld for me as far as Fallout 3. Yeah, and even that is probably too much to talk about Fallout 3, considering I've barely played it. Yeah, I mentioned OBS has version 27.2. It adds support for AJA video devices. I don't even know what that is. Some source blend modes like Photoshop, AV1 encoding, and an updated Chromium browser, and official Flatpak support, which would really just be for Ubuntu Linux, hotkey duplicate detection, and more. A bunch of little things. And then here they say immediately, we're aware of a rare system freeze affecting some subset of users on version 27.2. If you're encountering this, we recommend you downgrade back to 27.13. Which, yeah. And OBS is the software and the only software I use to stream, so that is straight up production. Like, this is not development for me, so it is really stupid and bad policy, and it's an example of being the only person in charge of me, that if I opt to make a mistake, that mistake will happen. So I need to be fairly hard on myself as my own boss to make sure I make the right decisions and recognize when I make mistakes and not repeat them. So that was a mistake for really no benefit anyways. Like, I'm not in the mood, particularly at the moment, to try and get ambitious and do something really crazy with my recording software. I don't even know what even would be on the top of my head, other than possibly making thumbnails, which making custom thumbnails hasn't really shown itself, at least for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Masters custom thumbnails. I'd have to go back and check those videos and see if they're performing even slightly better, because honestly, it's just so easy and so true to blame the YouTube algorithm. But yeah, I just think the YouTube algorithm has my channel in a blacklist, effectively a giant blacklist of, well, it's probably not really even a blacklist. It's probably, the YouTube algorithm has a whitelist of the top 1,000 YouTube channels, and those are the only ones that really get recommended. And everything else maybe gets a few fake recommendations here just to make it seem like you're getting impressions and shown in front of people's faces. But if you told me that the YouTube algorithm had been actively programmed to put videos in front of people that they absolutely knew would not watch my videos, that it was literally anti-advertising to it, people that hate video game videos, people that have never watched a video game video on YouTube in the first place, if they were getting into that level of detail, if you accused YouTube of doing that, I would believe you. Because the conversion rate, as it's called, from an impression to a view is incredibly low. Now, arguably, it's always been incredibly low for every form of advertising. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's some shenanigans happening also. So, ignoring my baseless accusations, the YouTube official blog has February's creators on the rise, so let's see who they're talking about. What's funny is there's just kind of an inconsistent issue there anyways, in that for every month I am not seeing a creators on the rise note. Here they're talking about this person I've never seen called Catherine Duelists. Duelists is a funny last name. Lifestyle creator puts a fresh spin on shopping hauls and decluttering hacks. Okay. I mean, definitely not something I'd ever watch, but maybe there's an audience out there. And then Tony Holiday is a music producer and sound designer who almost certainly has a production company behind him. It's very easy to just accuse any of these creators on the rise of actually being secretly funded by a production company. And here you have Quinn Fan, product reviewer who started pasting recipes. So she went from product reviewing, it seems like, to food, and that all of a sudden got her more views, which before that she was doing manga, wigs, powerlifting, makeup, and horror books, which, boy, does that seem like just a random assortment of things. I shouldn't have actually activated that card. And that's pretty much it. I guess there has been a December, November, October, September. And is this February's? I guess this would be January's. No, it says February's. We're still in February though. So they skipped January somehow. Wouldn't it always just be, shouldn't it always be a month behind? Like, how can you call these people the creator on the rise when you're only halfway through a month? Yeah. Almost certainly there was a delay there in releasing these articles, and this web page blog is probably the only actual work that some mid-tier to high-level YouTuber had to produce for an entire month. It sends a weird message. I'll leave it at that. Certainly that that you are saying a creator is on the rise by going from a weird, eclectic combination of random things into being your very basic channel that's just a food review channel, which, if anything, in my opinion, it just highlights how Good Mythical Morning, if there was one YouTube channel I could erase from the history of YouTube, Good Mythical Morning would be it. It is the most negatively impactful channel to content creators. It is a fine channel as far as its content. I like to watch it. I like their content. It would be a heavy loss, certainly, if people knew it was missing. But they have either figured out the algorithm or programmed the algorithm, and I think they probably programmed the algorithm and programmed YouTube viewers into the kind of content to expect on YouTube in a fairly negative way. Flippant, kind of comedic, short videos coming out every day, none of it really having to be of any real substance, none of it really having to matter. If you don't like a Good Mythical Morning, you come back the next day and get a different one. It's just not really high-minded or high quality as far as what they're doing, and yet it is trains the audience to expect that type of content in that style more than anything else. On top of which, the way Good Mythical More spins out and becomes a second channel that then reinforces basically the exact same thing, but it has to be its own separate channel so that they can double count their subscribers and pretend like they have a lot more subscribers than they actually do, is annoying. Certainly. And then once they had saturated having all of their subscribers on Good Mythical More, they spun out to the Kitchen channel and the Ear Biscuits channel, and Trevor has a podcast channel, so that there's probably 4 or 5 different channels of the exact same subscribers, or at least 90% of the exact same subscribers subscribe to these different channels so they can pretend like they have 4 or 5 times as many viewers. And that's another trend that really shouldn't be encouraged on YouTube, and yet it is the de facto standard way to do things on YouTube. Also, certainly Good Mythical Morning is embracing the Patreon concept with having people pay to get exclusive content on top of everything else. with their good mythical society, and certainly a lot of merchandising and advertising and in video advertising, which is also annoying. Alright, let's do this. Do 24 here, and then 14 here, and then 23 here. Not that doing that extra 14 actually does much for us. Might cause us to do a little bit more damage and get maybe a bit more of a reward. Almost every stream here is boiling down to me having to complain about something. But honestly, that was the reason I started live streaming and doing the news in the first place, was to be the outlet to rant and complain about things, so I don't get into long rants that are not video game related. But yeah, I have to throw some shade again against Twitter Gaming here. They're cross promoting, or just really simping, for lack of a better term, with Alloy. It says reunited with Alloy, she/her. And then the real thing I was gonna be upset with them is, here is a tweet that says the game that would make a perfect movie and TV adaptation. There is literally no reason in my mind to encourage video game adaptations in TV or movie. There was an announcement recently, yesterday I believe, that Netflix was going to try and make a BioShock movie. Netflix has been kind of very, very bad about making BioShock, by making movies from anime, and only slightly good about turning Castlevania into an anime versus anime to live action. Like Netflix's track record over the past year has not been particularly great. And so they're going to try and make something like BioShock. How do you make a movie like BioShock based on the BioShock story? You either do something that is just a generic horror movie, and people will be upset about that. I don't think they'll be actually even that upset. I think they'll be apathetic to it. Really. If it's got to be somewhere around 2 hours, even if you were going to give it a nice wide 2.5 hour feature film length, which is frankly too long for most people's attention spans, you're just not going to be able to tell the full story of BioShock that way. You're going to have to drop a lot of the side narratives, a lot of the side characters. It's going to literally just be the main character against Andrew Ryan and a few set pieces. There is arguably maybe technology now where you could do a full green screen like The Mandalorian did, where the entire set is a 360 green screen, and you've got the Unreal Engine assets of the game. So if you can polish those assets up and set the backgrounds of the tight enclosed spaces of Rapture, I assume this is going to be around Rapture, and it's not going to try and touch upon Rapture and the other in the air location, because that would be really, really a lot, certainly. But yeah, with the tight enclosed spaces, a wraparound green screen is not going to really work too well. You can't have a Big Daddy in CGI on the green screen in the back and pretend like that character is actually interacting with the main actor, which we don't even know what the main character looks like in Bioshock 1, so... Or maybe we get a quick picture of him, but it was kind of cartoony. So, yeah. Whoever they cast will be a surprise, certainly to a lot of people. Whoever they cast for Andrew Ryan would be a surprise. So yeah, you could have the ocean in a 360 green screen around the Mandalorian, and the walls are perhaps using the assets, and that might save you a little bit of budget. But I think your prop budget and your set decoration budget is going to be basically through the roof. And didn't Netflix just announce that they were raising their prices too? I know Amazon Prime did. I think Netflix in the last year has raised their prices. So, but yeah, I wouldn't have a lot of hope for that. And you also have to remember, you're going to have children being murdered in a Bioshock movie. People kind of forget about that. Like that they're going to have to imply, at the very least, that they're going to have to get a kid actor. They're going to have to dress them up in basically cosplay to look like a horrific child, unless they completely remove that element. And if they remove that element, then it's not really Bioshock. So the little sisters, you've got to get several child actors to play little sisters, and you have to imply that at least other people around the main character have been killing these girls and stealing the atom out of them. Otherwise, you're making a shit movie that's not covering little sisters, not covering big daddies really accurately at that point. And yeah, that's just not... It's just going to be a real tough sell. And honestly, it should be something closer to a trilogy of movies or a mini-series instead of just one movie. Because if you're cutting things to get down to the length of a movie, you're probably cutting a lot of locations and a lot of events that happen in the game. Remember that the first Bioshock game also ended on a pretty terrible boss fight, so you gotta kind of show that also. But if you're not showing some of the iconic locations, and if you have to squeeze in, what was his name, Salazar, the character that was like the break character in the middle, if you're not really focusing in on talking about splicers at all because you're trying to save time, like, it's all going to fall apart very quickly. Okay, this is gonna suck. I need to summon this. Face up attack position. Activate that. Bring that back to the hand. Destroy one card on the field. Destroy this one. Return this one. I am shocked that this worked. because it didn't. Yeah, I think I've lost here. Yeah, the Sonic movie, arguably, I think nearly half of all Sonic games are bad games in the first place, so making it into a movie is not terrible, but I still, even at that, wouldn't really say that the Sonic movie was a great adaptation of Sonic the video game as much as it was a decent adaptation of Sonic the character, and I think Sonic actually does work better as a character than a video game. But yeah, I don't think there's ever been a single good video game movie or TV adaptation. I don't think there ever will be. I think it is incredibly backwards thinking to say that that movies and video games are the improved version or even on the same level of quality as a video game, because you're going from something that is not interactive into something that you're going from something that is interactive to something that is not interactive. You're losing dimensions of quality, in my opinion. Alright, well, the only thing I can potentially kill is that, so unless that does something for me. I guess what I should have probably done is read these cards, drawn a card, see if maybe I could have gotten the other character and used his ability to destroy all the cards in general without specifically targeting any of these cards. And yeah, once again, Twitter Gaming is just like the worst Twitter account. I shouldn't even bother to follow it. Like, only 1 million people follow it on Twitter in general, but they're just tweeting out gaming ... Like, they are a worse retweeter or source of video game news than even I am, because you could literally go to my Twitter account, look at everybody that I'm following, and the vast majority of the people I'm following is a video game news source or video game website that you could just follow. And if you want more of a more generic, watered down experience, you could just follow Video Games Chronicles Twitter feed, or Gamatsu's Twitter feed, or GameDevelopers.com's Twitter feed, or even Nebel, N-I-E-B-L-B-E-L, I believe. And you would get far better and more news as far as games, that video game news. And you'd also probably get better conversations if you wanted to have actual conversations about video games. Having those conversations on something like Discord or some other site, or Reddit even, will get you much more interaction and a much better quality of interaction. Moving on, my macro kind of messed up a little bit, so I've got an extra set of fall list games to look at here. Here we have a game called Mortal Decay, which I don't know if there's enough relevancy here for me to care about it. It is rated really, really positively for a small number of people. But looking at the screenshots, it just kind of doesn't feel like there's an actual game here that I want to play. Like, I think there is an actual game, and this isn't too far from like an Amnesia style experience. But the thing is, I barely even want to play the Amnesia games because they're very, very relevant. Yeah. I will say, though, this does look like a game, and if you love something like Amnesia, the kind of horror survival, you've got to hide and avoid taking damage, I think Mortal Decay does look interesting, or interesting enough. I'm gonna have to become finely attuned to the sound effects of the timeout running out. So that's going to destroy the card, but I don't think it stops it from actually activating. So if anything, it just showed his hand, making it easier for me to summon this other character instead. Activate that. Attack again, attack again. Add one other Cyber Dragon from your deck to your graveyard to your hand. So he's doing something to get Cyber Dragons. So I would assume he's playing some kind of Blue Eyes White Dragon type deck. Blue Eyes Cyber Dragon. English, Portuguese. Yeah. I think I just have to make an executive decision for this type of game that while this would, under all rights, be justified to be put on the wish list, it really is just not something that I think I'd spend the extra time on. Whereas Mortal Blitz here has some cleavage, so that catches my attention a little bit more. This one is 72% positive, so just barely over. And I think the problem here is this would be a VR game and single player only. I guess because it's a VR game and it's frankly a VR game that looks like it has maybe a little bit more to it, or it's trying to at least pretend like it has a little bit more to it than most VR games. I could probably leave this on the fall list. Yeah. It does seem like very often when I see VR games, there's not any characters around talking to you. You often don't even have elbows or forearms, and you do get this like just gloved floating picture. Same is true here. I don't know why they don't just always stretch an arm there. Like the possibility that somebody's going to have super long forearms and then you're going to have this really stretched out forearm that looks unrealistic, while that may happen occasionally, most of the time will not happen. Whereas the possibility of people being able to stretch their wrist far enough to see that there is just a floating hand will happen a lot. And probably that is at the core of it an AI or an API issue, where these games being programmed to make VR content have been pre-designed to only show wrists and hands, and that's kind of ridiculous. Just add fabric sleeves, like big bulky fabric sleeves. It's not even going to be an issue of skin color at that point. bring this back. Let's see. Next, we have a game on here called Morkred. It's barely relevant, but it's pretty positive. The thing here is, does it require co-op? I think it may actually require 2-player and local co-op only. Excuse me. So, if I was to try to play this game, it would be a weird, like, Brothers of Two Tales situation where you're rolling this orb between two people and I would have to control two different controllers at the same time. And so, honestly, it's just not playable. And I can see why there's not a lot of relevancy to this, or not people that played it, is because there's no online to it either. So, yeah. If they were going to make a co-op game and not put online in it, they set themselves up for failure from the beginning. Oh. This sucks. See what we can do here. So I guess I could have summoned this before. Banish Cyber Dragon with different levels from your hand face up and a graveyard, then destroy the equal number of cards your opponent controls. If this card... Alright, well... Bring them all back. Then in the turn. So yeah, I have to say no to Morkred because of its poor influence. This Pokemon clone game probably won't make it to the wish list, but I'll give it some more time. Moonshot the Great Espionage needs more time also. Moon Law here looks like it might just be a Metroid clone, which it's mostly positive, but I'm gonna give it some more time just to see how the reviews settle out. Like, it is really bending over backwards potentially to play a free game. Well, actually, seeing that it's free, I can just remove it from the fall list at this point. Anyways, yeah. To play a game on Steam that is basically just a parody / ripoff of Metroid just because Nintendo would content ID and copyright, if I played the actual Metroid game, is not really a smart move. It's easier just to say, I'm not going to play a Metroid game or a Metroid clone game until there's a good one. And there are a couple good ones out there. So the only slight difference is maybe they don't have that 8-bit visuals, but I'm not even particularly a fan of the 8-bit visuals, so that doesn't matter either. Next we have Moonbase here, which is mixed, and so that makes my decision very easy to remove this VR game. The fact that something's free and it's not being particularly well received highlights something. Then we have a weird game called Moon here. Remix RPG adventure. I think we put this on the follow list, the wish list. This might be a game that I just never actually decide to buy or play. But I think there is a level of relevancy to this, and I think there is a level of quality to this. Move is maybe an infinite runner where you're playing as a bull. Yeah, this is kind of just an infinite runner. And I'm just gonna lose here. So you're riding probably a horse, and you're trying to cattle wrestle and just ride them from point A to point B with some kind of silly physics on top of it. While that idea is somewhat intriguing, I don't know if there's a live game there. And then aliens are abducting your cows, and then the bull is chasing you. In a lot of ways, this is probably a very cutesy way in which you can make a simplistic game that is experimenting with pathfinding and AI. This is a free game, so I'll just say check it out if you're interested. I wouldn't be surprised if this is actually a student puzzle. Yeah, that's the deal. It was a student game, so for that reason I'll put it on the wish list, just to highlight what definitely did seem like something that a student project would focus on. Is the game doesn't have to have a real story or really any sales appeal, just something that can kind of show that they can program things. This game, Monstrous Molecules, I think I might be able to just say no to it now, but I'll give it a little bit more. Nope, 2020 is already a year, isn't it? I'm forgetting that it's 2022, so it's had its time. This is just not going to have any relevancy. And then Monstrous Lovers here, I guess we'll give some more time to, as a visual novel dating monsters. It's really a gimmick that actually happens more often than you would think. Alright. Fix that. Set that. And then the turn. So that gets us kind of back into our normal format, so we can look at Video Games Chronicles things. Pokemon topped US game sales in January, but PS5 and Xbox outsold the Switch. Okay. Which, that would make some sense, because I would just expect everybody except for me has a Switch, or access to a Switch. Ooh. Well, if I'm gonna lose this card, I should just lose a card I don't care about, because I'm not paying attention. Yeah, remember, most consoles kind of sell at a loss or a break-even point, so Nintendo selling more software in a month is much better than Nintendo selling more hardware. I've not really seen any indication that Nintendo cares one bit that people are buying the OLED model of the Switch or aren't buying the OLED version of the Switch. I think they're much more focused on software, for better or worse. Let's see. Dying Light 2's latest PC patch is now live with console updates to follow. This might be old news. Some of these might have been old news. Infinity Ward discusses Warzone Chapter 2 and confirms a Modern Warfare sequel. If you're interested in that, check out that Video Games Chronicle article. The Uncharted movie has a solid box office debut, but gets middling reviews. It launched in 15 markets with US and Canada the fall of this week, which launching outside of the United States seems weird, to say the least. In a lot of ways, I expect the Uncharted movie to do about as well as the Assassin's Creed movie, live-action movie, did, which is to say, not that well, particularly. There is talks of an Indiana Jones movie in development. I don't think it's started shooting at this point. So Uncharted could have been, since it is basically just stealing the idea of Indiana Jones, a few steps apart, because if Uncharted is stealing the ideas of Lara Croft, then Lara Croft was stealing the ideas of Indiana Jones as a movie. So yeah, it could have been a middle step there, but I just don't think there is a need or desire for a middle step. It's not really video game related, but I did find out that because the CW is on the verge of being sold, that Babylon 5, that I don't know if it was going to be a continuation or a remake. Probably should have been a remake. Nearly half of the actors of Babylon 5 at this point, of the main actors, are dead. It's been so long. I almost half wonder if they shouldn't just have a straight up animated series like Star Trek, the animated series, where they just take the voice acting from the first Babylon, from Babylon 5, and just animate over it, rotoscope over it, and then maybe try to throw in some better stories or make some slight edits here and there. It would be weird if a new Babylon 5 came out and it was like Battlestar Galactica, where it was just like something completely unexpected and different and similar in name only. But working for the CW, it almost certainly would have been some weird teenage drama that nobody would have liked. Some dark teenage supernatural style drama. And it still may happen, it's just depends on what happens to the CW in general. But yeah, that pilot pitch has been shelved. I don't know if a pilot was actually shot. I think they were just in the pitching stage, and they hadn't even gotten the funding to make a pilot at that point. Also, the Orville Season 3, which would be a Hulu original, has been pushed back just because of the pandemic and scheduling issues. And a lot of things have been pushed back. And so we'll have to see if Orville somehow manages to maintain itself, because there's just been such long gaps between it, to the point where they could get a season 4 or season 5 enough to have a real chance at syndication. I still feel like, particularly in syndication, when they start editing out things for more commercials and getting rid of the goofiness of the first season, and the odd comedies, once they eliminate the parody aspects there, it probably would be a better experience with a second edit. Like, also jumped around and looked at like Hulu and Amazon Prime and Netflix. I don't even think I really looked at Netflix in the past couple days, as I'm resting my neck and just not really recording footage. And I watched all of the first season of that Hulu series, Only Murderers in the Hotel, or I think it's what it's called, starring Steve Martin and Martin Short and Selena Gomez, I believe. And I thought that was kind of fun as a series, but it probably is a series that is best suited to be binged. I wouldn't really think I would like it if I watched it episode to episode. There's something very funny also about them building the entire show around the idea of them launching a podcast and then having an entire episode that has no voice acting in it at all until like the very end, last sentence. And I don't think the last sentence was even that impactful. And there's, I think, a danger or valid accusation that it puts in a lot of twists and turns for twist and turns sake, instead of setting up a mystery that you could have really tried to deduce or figure out who the killer was in the first place. But that is also kind of like the Sherlock Holmes problem, where most Sherlock Holmes stories don't give you enough information that you could actually guess who the murderer is, even by the time Sherlock Holmes is revealing who the murderer is. But then you also see the case where people guess the endings, and then that kind of spoils the surprise for people. Well, I think the biggest problem is people guess the endings, particularly for TV shows or books, and then the writers and producers overreact and change who they planned for the killer to be, when really they should just stick to the guns and say, yep, some of you guessed it. We didn't want to compromise our art and our story just because some rando on the internet has guessed our ending. Anyways, back to the Uncharted movie. I'm not going to show this trailer because I would probably get content ID. Let's see. We can look at its Rotten Tomatoes score, I suppose. It's being considered 42%. 42%, so less than 50%, which is pretty bad for critics. Of course, there's this long-running case where 42% is rotten. It would be considered fresh above that. There's long been this running case where Rotten Tomatoes, which is owned by the movie companies now, has had the reviewers review things badly and then the audience score review things well. But the critics say, promising case but misleadingly titled, Uncharted mines the best-selling source material to produce a disappointing echo of superior adventure films. PG-13 probably hurt it a little bit, because I'm fairly certain the Uncharted games are rated M for mature. This is a Sony Pictures distributor, by the way, too, so Sony PlayStation probably struggling with those reviews. And if anything, I just take from that the same thing I've said in the past, is don't make video game movies. You're never going to make it as good if you're going to make a video game movie, make a video game movie based on something that's benign or mediocre. Like if you made a Life is Strange video game movie, that would probably be fine because there's very little interactivity in Life is Strange anyways. If you made a movie based on a point and click like Broken Sword, if you took those 5 Broken Sword games and made a movie around it, that'd probably be fine. There's no interactivity there to be mourned when it's missing. Like even Indiana Jones and Fate of Atlantis, not a terrible concept to make into a movie, and yet they chose not to do that at any point. Or The Dig is a kind of fine movie to make. The Dig as a point-and-click adventure game would be a fine movie to make. But also, in a lot of cases, if you were going to make a video game movie, don't make it a theatrical release movie. Make it a cheap, this is going straight to our streaming service experience. Something that you don't have to hold to higher standards. And at a certain level, I guess Netflix is moving towards that direction where Netflix movies are not being held to the same standard as a theatrical release movie, even though Netflix has had fairly good movies like Uncut Gems. I hear is really good, even though I never bothered to watch it. But the vast majority of Netflix movies are garbage. The other Adam Sandler movies, they're garbage. Moving on with video game news, Warzone Pacific Season 2 launches with new weapons, locations, and means of travel. I think we probably had already talked about that. Dear Esther Landmark Edition is currently free on Steam for the 10th anniversary. I grabbed it. It may not be available for free anymore. Apologies if I'm late. The original version of Dear Esther was free when I grabbed that, so I've now managed to get this game twice, I think, for free, and not gotten around to playing either one of them, which is kind of fun because it is one of the original walking simulators that felt like it had enough quality to bother to mention. Maybe it was just a game that was a little overhyped by mainstream video game journalists, I don't know, but it's never had any great draw to me as far as why I would want to play that versus something that would just be longer or just have more interactivity to it. Although now that I have everything kind of automated, like the fear of playing a bunch of small games has been reduced. It still takes a little bit more time to schedule things on YouTube if I just made a ton of spotlights in a row, but I could easily play a whole bunch of small games and spotlight them. I don't want to get too much into the habit, though, of playing a bunch of games that I know I'm going to spotlight and then start playing games that I might spotlight and only play one episodes in it. Whereas I may have been in a different mood and actually played some games all the way through. Dear Esther I would play all the way through, but it'd be so short it probably still would be a spotlight. Like, there really is no benefit to me to make an extra 5,000 videos on my channel by not really playing video games. I don't want to fall into the crankiness we see with a lot of mainstream video game journalists where they just don't really want to play video games at all. Or at least that's the accusation thrown against them, and I think it's a fairly valid accusation in a lot of cases. let's go back to the main menu and see if the daily login is reset. Yep. Daily login, and I spectate. Got spell cards were done. And win a duel and rank duel being done. So if we have 11 days left, can we get 28 from 15? No, you can't. Wow, if you're gonna get all these rewards, you really do have to log in every single day. And obviously, I need to get better at that. Seems like your big reward, though, is oddly at 20 days, because you get 50 for logging in for 20 days and 20 for every other individual day. But it is quite the speed bump to have to come in here and just spectate again. Let's put this in fast forward mode, and then we'll talk about some more video game news. Video Games Chronicle says after 200 days, employee group A, better Ubisoft. No, it's employee group, should be quote, A, better Ubisoft, says none of its demands have been met. In a new statement, management are either accidentally ignorant or simply don't want to listen, which clearly they simply don't want to listen. But also, maybe Ubisoft doesn't have to listen. Of course, when you look at like Ubisoft pushing NFTs and the quartz and all of that, there does seem like there is a level of stubbornness and stupidity in the upper management. But also, this may very well be a case of just a French company being a French company and dealing with French people who are trying to push for unionization. The unions I think already exist in the French company, so maybe a better Ubisoft is pushing for like unionization in one of Ubisoft's subsidiaries. The thing I'll say, since we've been over this 100 times, and at a certain point, a better Ubisoft, just in its title, is always going to push for more and more power and influence, and they're going to only survive if they push the narrative that something actually needs to be improved at Ubisoft. Like, this story is just going to continuously go on, even if Ubisoft caved in to every demand that a better Ubisoft had now. There would just be more demands later. But from my perspective, compared to Activision Blizzard, it's going to, at the very least, be a long time. Very possibly, the other thought is it will never come to light that there's a level of poor management or abuse happening at Ubisoft. There's just been a lot of accusations that have solidified my mind on the path that these accusations don't have weight and that they're kind of exaggerated, or they have no truth in them at all. Just nothing is stuck at all. Remember that the vast amount of these accusations against Ubisoft were printed and I think legally proved to be illegal slander in French courts by a couple of French tabloid journalists, tabloid newspapers, I would call them. Maybe they're not really tabloid. yeah, I'll take the tabloid out because I never actually heard them called tabloid, but 2 French newspapers, one of which has been found guilty of slander. The other, oddly, not found guilty, even though they co-worked on the paper. But it would be ridiculous to say shenanigans and immaturity didn't happen at Ubisoft, but it really seems like it was a very minor incident that got blown out of proportion as an excuse for what may very well be a small percentage of employees to Karen out. The Karen out is probably not a fair word to say, but that would be how I'd phrase it. To feign outrage, to push for a whole lot of other stuff. I'm gonna have to see if this is gonna work. This might work, but this is gonna be a difficult turnaround. There is an interesting question I think to ask here. After 200 days, do we get this exact same article where it just says after 1 year, after 365 years? Do we get the same article after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? Like, if you're working in a job and you're unhappy at the job for 200 days, you've been working in that job for probably somewhere around, I would say, 180 more days than you should have been. And it is not fair to say people should just quit their jobs and go find a different one. I know it's not fair to say that. I have no idea what the job market is like in France, but they should have, individuals have been, if they really are miserable at Ubisoft, they've been miserable at Ubisoft for way longer than they should have been. Yet at this point, it just kind of proves that a better Ubisoft does not have any teeth as far as actually striking or people leaving. Nothing is going to change. I gave one job I had when I was very young 6 months, basically. And after 6 months of working there, I realized that there was nothing that was going to improve at that job ever. And I quit. Whereas I worked another job after that, and because I had only worked 6 months at that job, I stupidly decided to prove to myself that I could stick to a job, and it led me to working in a job for at least 2.5 years longer than I should have. And because of that, I was very, very miserable at this awful job for 2.5 years. It was probably good for the first 2.5 years, and then the second 2.5 years were kind of awful. And yeah, I should have, at that point, after being miserable, maybe you give it 30 days, maybe you give it even 6 months. But you don't give it nearly a full year or 3/4 of a full year. Don't make yourself miserable like that for no reason. Things are not going to change quickly unless they do change quickly. And if real change actually does need to happen at Ubisoft, which maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. The best way that any individual at this point could affect that real change is to stop working there, stop being part of the system that is enabling Ubisoft to still succeed. As gamers, we have a whole bunch of better reasons to not buy Ubisoft games at this point than to support a better Ubisoft. And so we have to make our own decisions for our own needs and wants, or mostly wants. But yeah, if Ubisoft had lost half of its staff because it was a bad place to work, say sometime around Assassin's Creed 3, then we may very well have not had the annual release of Assassin's Creed 3, which wasn't that good, and then the kind of annual releases of Assassin's Creed games where maybe Black Flag is good, but then Syndicate's bad, and then off and on like that. Maybe they wouldn't have put effort into making Watch Dogs, which was kind of an unnecessary series that went nowhere. So as gamers ourselves, we may very well have been spared some repetitive bad content had there been the need for half of Ubisoft's employees to go off and form their own company, or go off and work for a different company. But that didn't happen. In fact, none of these complaints came to light until basically Ubisoft had already gone off the rails, for lack of a better description, with DLC and microtransactions, and really screwed the consumer multiple times over. Moving on, the Horizon Forbidden West is getting an official Lego set. I feel like this had already been announced. It's probably being rushed out because there was that other set that they held back on. What was that other set? There was a controversy around it, like the Overwatch sets. Yeah. Because of the Activision Blizzard controversy, the Overwatch sets were pulled, and frankly, Lego's pulled 2 or 3 other sets. I think they just are having problems getting either raw plastic or maintaining their presses to make more sets, or just shipping problems in general. Although I don't know if Lego in any of its factories doesn't just assemble and box all products from that individual factory, so only the final product probably needs to be shipped. There we go. With no real warning, we were once again knocked down a rank, and we are just teetering at gold, season 4, 5. I guess the question is, do you get the rewards at the end of the month, or what? I feel like I have been at season 4. Upon reaching a new rank during season 2 to 28, you receive the corresponding reward, but I'm fairly certain I have been to season 4, and yet it's kind of implying that I'm not going to get this reward. Maybe it's more implying that you have not gotten it yet, because I only made gold level 4 this month, and I didn't make it last month. but they need to rework things because I deserve, frankly, to get all of these gems up until this point, and that's where they could definitely make it feel like it's more generous. It's a big difference between getting like 100 gems and never getting any of these gems ever again. That's really gonna screw over people that get like Platinum 1. They'll get all the rewards once in the first season and then never again. People know that, and that's why they need to update that. Looking at this Lego set with the tall neck character, this in a lot of ways feels more like a model kit than even a Lego set, because most Lego sets are square boxy buildings of some sort, and this is very much not that. It looks like a Zoid model kit. You get a little alloy minifig. There's a traffic light wrapped in vines and some kind of computer terminal in a tree. It doesn't really scream that it's going to have a lot of pieces. It's kind of funny you have the round base too, which also is not very Lego-y. More and more as I'm building these tables very slowly for better organizing and making my Lego set look nice, I am thinking about what sets do I really want to get in the future, because there is kind of a level of consistency that I want to see going forward with sets. I don't want to buy random things that either don't stand on their own, which I would say the Horizon Forbidden West set does not stand well on its own. You need 2 or 3 other sets of other creatures around it, and probably something that literally said Horizon Forbidden West for that to work. And these video game sets very possibly are not going to have any relevancy in 5 to 10 years. As for this giant table I'm building, I tested the LEDs and ordered more to make sure they would work, and because I needed more for it to do. But these are, what I've gotten is particle board with vinyl wrap on it, and while the first one I got was like 100% blemish free when it was delivered to me, the second one I opened had a lot of dings and dents, and the vinyl is peeling into place after I washed it with a slightly damp cloth. It's a cheap, like $90. Each bookshelf that can be rotated 90 degrees is $90, and you definitely see it. The shelves themselves can only hold about 30 pounds because they're just these really thin plastic vinyl pegs holding them up. In a lot of ways, it may not have been a terrible thought to buy one of them and then use one as a reference to then buy more solid wood and cut the pieces to replace each piece. Of course, you'd have to be pretty good woodworker with a very well equipped workshop to do that, and that's not me. But yeah, I could see slowly having to just replace everything around everything to make it work a little bit better. And at a certain point, I don't know if you really need to even buy a bookshelf in the first place to get the measurements and build your own thing. And if I was going to build my own thing, I wouldn't have bought 6 of these bookshelves to put next to each other. I would have just built one big thing. I haven't had any network trouble, but I will say Yu-Gi-Oh! Does sometimes individually seem to have trouble connecting to its servers. I think it's suffering from being a little popular. Yeah, I'm just looking at my recording to make sure it's still recording, because that would really suck if it wasn't. But yeah, I could see potentially having to put braces and replace pieces, and it just dissolve down. I was going to put pegs in it, but the particle board is kind of around the edges of the wood, and on the inside is pretty much hollow. It may barely be even a particle board. I've seen things where it is like literally foam in the middle and not even wood except for around where the legs are connected on the table. Or it's just like cardboard in the middle. And once I had two of them side by side and could just kind of bump them with my knee, which was the only real concern, I found quickly that it didn't move around as much as I thought it might. My concern for the need of pegging them together and joining them together was that things on top of the table, being Lego, being connected, if you bumped one, it would just shift everything and break everything. I don't think that really is going to happen, though, because it doesn't move that much. It's not like you bump it and it slides across the room. It barely moves at all in either direction. Because I'm adding LEDs, though, it is going to keep them, I would say probably 1.5 millimeters apart, maybe 1.5 centimeters. Maybe my scale is wrong there. So there is a small gap because the LEDs are in between the shelves, and I didn't want to have to pull out a chisel and like chisel out the protruding parts, which I could have done that, but my fear is they would fall apart immediately. Again, it's just such cheap wood. Instead, I'm going to just use some felt tip feet and put them in the corner and just build up a cushion where each table will be touching on a felt tip pad from the sides, not on the floor per se. It'll be on the carpet on the floor, but it'll just be touching each other, and that'll make a very small gap for the LEDs to not be directly the only pressure point as the tables are next to each other. So everything there is working so far, and this has nothing to do with video games really, it's just the other project I'm working on at the moment, which, speaking of projects, there definitely is server projects I probably need to get back and working on. At the very least, I need to turn the server on. Hasn't been on probably for 1.5 months. But it does seem like it's going to work, and that's nice. But to get back to Lego sets based on video games, while the Mario NES Lego set is very iconic, where you have an old square TV and an 8-bit Mario jumping around, even the other Nintendo sets have not been that iconic, and I definitely am giving consideration to just giving away my Minecraft Lego set. I have nieces and nephews now that are still kind of into Lego, and so this will probably be my next couple of years will probably be my last opportunities to give away sets and rethink the collection. Plus, them being kids, they'll take anything you give them. Certainly, when it comes to toys, and they'll try for more, which I was exactly the same as a kid. In fact, I was way better at it than any of my nieces and nephews. I was incredibly good for my Nintendo collection as far as talking people into giving me things that they shouldn't give me or spending a lot more money on things. Do I not have? Apparently I don't. But yeah, I don't think I'd be buying this one. And I would just definitely say get the NES set first and get some of the other sets. Even like the typewriter set is more iconic, or the ship in the bottle set. It's 1,222 pieces. A significant amount of these pieces are going to be really small. And this might be a decent set if you were just trying to piece it out and get specific sets, and selling the minifig character might get you some money back that way. But I'm not particularly enthusiastic about it. It definitely falls into more of the category of like the Star Wars sets too, where while I do have a Millennium Falcon, that's as much as I ever wanted for the Lego Star Wars sets. I would have taken a Death Star, sure, but that would have been it otherwise. I cannot activate this. Well, that screwed up. I was exactly at 2,000. If I had even 100 more life points, I could have activated it, but moving on, Bethesda's Tango Gameworks, which I guess is now owned by Microsoft, has announced a new game, and it's for mobile. The Xbox-owned studio is working on a Japan-only smartphone title. Well, that's interesting, certainly, because in a lot of ways this is the backdoor entrance of Microsoft into owning a Japanese studio. I guess they already did, didn't they? Tango Gameworks, they made parts of the enemy Evil Within, I think one, if not all of the Evil Within 1 and 2. And they're led by the Resident Evil creator Shinji Mikami, which the Resident Evil creator probably doesn't deserve as much praise as you would think, considering how Resident Evil 1 has been changed so much by like Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village. This is also the developer of Ghostwire Tokyo, which I guess that assumes that Ghostwire Tokyo is either out or soon to be out. And they're releasing a game called Hero Dice, which I wonder if that isn't too far away from being like a Dungeon Dice Monsters style of gacha game. It's certainly an interesting thing. We gotta watch this trailer just to see what the game is, because would a gacha game and a Japanese focused game possibly succeed enough in Japan so that we see a Western global version of the game released later on? Yeah, we're not really seeing a lot of gameplay mechanics there. Dice is running around and dice is being rolled, and their anime characters fighting. It might be that it's not a gacha game. It might be that these are just your main characters, and that is that. One shirtless guy, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different anime girls with different hair color, all seeming to be about the same age and depiction. Here's another shirtless guy over here with a cape. Maybe they'll add more characters as it goes. Like, the whole business model there needs to be asked as far as, is Microsoft going to be happy if they get into a gacha style monthly income DLC type experience? Maybe, maybe not. It could be that Tango Gameworks releases the game in Japan, it makes a ton of money, and then all of a sudden Microsoft sees that money and goes, well, I am more than happy for that to keep happening. It would be very bad, certainly, for Microsoft if all of a sudden they say, we need more gacha games. Every studio we own now needs to make a gacha game or a mobile game. Because we've seen other companies certainly try and push that. That was what Activision Blizzard was trying to push. That, in part, I think, was what Bethesda was trying to push. I guess time will tell. It might also be a case that Tango Gameworks is just trying to buy themselves some time for their next big game. Maybe they'll make one mobile game and then one Ghostwire Tokyo style game and then a mobile game. Maybe it'll just bounce between the two. Moving on, Super Mario's RPG director says he wants a sequel to be his final game. He also has a plot in mind for the sequel. I believe there was some bad blood between Nintendo and Super Mario RPG in some way. Maybe it had nothing to do with the RPG. Maybe it had nothing to do with the director. But I don't think Nintendo has really any desire to make a Super Mario RPG 2. The RPG elements in Super Mario RPG have long since been replaced with Pokemon games, so it would be self-cannibalizing to make something that that kind of cannibalized this. Maybe it was Shigeru Miyamoto didn't like the RPG game. I could certainly see the Japanese taking offense with some of the comedy in Super Mario RPG because they were kind of parodying and making fun of previous Super Mario games up until that point, which would have just been Mario Brothers 1, 2, and 3 and Super Mario World. So yeah, I heavily suspect that won't be the case. Maybe he is invoking his imminent death as being probably an older Japanese man as a way of trying to see if he can force that to happen, but I bet that won't move Nintendo in that direction either. Super Mario RPG also kind of uniquely goes in a very different direction and introduces a bunch of characters that have never been used in really anything else. The Paper Mario series has replaced it, and it would be much more likely that they would just make a new Paper Mario game. Moving on, the next Xbox Game Pass's releases seemingly have been revealed according to Video Games Chronicles. Total War, Warhammer 3, RoboQuest, Madden NFL 22. Getting Madden right after the Super Bowl, which maybe that's the right way that should go. It probably doesn't lose them any real sales for real hardcore Madden fans, and it probably gets them some casual players who might want to play a little bit of football in a video game form in the off-season of NFL football. Super Mega Baseball 3 and Galactic Civilizations 3. And they were update year. These have been officially announced. So Mass Effect Legendary Edition, Lawn Mowing Simulator, Madden NFL 20, Total War Warhammer 3, RoboQuest Game Preview, which sounds like it's a demo, Galactic Civilizations 3, Super Mega Baseball 3, and Alice Madness Returns for PC via EA Play, which that's surprising a little bit. Particularly since I would like to see another Alice, American McGee's game. Notice that it's not labeled as American McGee's Alice here. The fact that EA is willing to take that game and take it out of being hidden specifically behind EA Play and putting it on the Game Pass titles, which maybe you still need EA Play to get these games, or maybe you don't. Like, I haven't paid enough attention, honestly. Do you get EA games now if you have Microsoft Game Pass? I think you might. But yeah. The fact that they're even willing to mention or do any kind of deal with Alice Madness Returns is a good sign that Alice is coming back in some form or factor. Now, that form or factor may very well be the TV show / movie, I forget which one it was going to be, instead of potentially getting a new game. These guys are driving me crazy. Moving on, Cyberpunk's new gen versions and 1.5 patch are officially out. They've also come out with a 5-hour free trial. They've also, one of the things that they highlighted when I was trying to get a full list of what's been updated, on top of just kind of removing junk, they removed the tutorial at the beginning, I think, is one of the things they said. See, they've reworked the perks tree. They've designed the combat to be fairer and to remove less useful abilities. It says they'll be adding new features like knife throwing. Game economy has been rebalanced and it's easier for players to earn cash. New player customizations, new features of renting apartments across Night Series and customizing their interiors. In a lot of ways, this version 1.5 sounds like it might be closer to a version 2.0, but maybe they're trying to do even more in a 2.0. But yeah, I definitely would have to see I feel like if Cyberpunk 2077 had managed to release like January 1st with a new patch, or if this was their initial release, that would have been even better. But had they come out with patch 1.5 in January 1st, you probably would have had a whole month of no other competition. So of course people would go back and potentially buy it and play it. It now feels like, now that we're getting back to having games released, it's a little bit harder to justify spending time on a game that's already failed once. Like, I think I would probably lean towards playing Halo Infinite in its unfinished state is right now versus going back or even trying Cyberpunk. Like, at some point in the future, I do feel like maybe I will get Cyberpunk 2077, but I don't think I would particularly care to play it. So here's the full patch notes according to Video Games Chronicles. Adding performance mode and ray tracing modes, features. Adding apartments, 4 apartments. If you take a shower, you get refreshed, much like sleeping in Fallout 3 gives you a well-rested perk. Well, there is also a rested perk that's plus 20% skill perks. In a lot of ways, seeing those two perks makes me feel like they just copy and pasted a lot of RPG elements from something like Fallout 3. And they probably did. But yeah, looking at these full quest notes, a lot of this is going to heavily rely on just how much bug fixing has happened. I'm gonna lose here, so. Oddly, the easy game difficulty is now moderately more challenging. Yeah, bug fixes I think are going to be kind of the main thing that you would want to have fixed. Perk changes. Of course, if you haven't played the game like me, all of this really doesn't mean much to me. Yeah, I'm just kind of slowly scrolling through this long list and and it just seems like a lot. But what specifically stood out to me was that I saw somewhere that they said, and I can't even find it in that long list, that they had reduced the amount of vendor trash and just junk you pick up. And honestly, that's something I think all games Video Games Chronicles says Hideki Kamiya says he's, quote, totally serious about resurrecting Xbox exclusive Scalebound. I'm sure he's serious. I doubt Microsoft would be serious about that. But he's not saying if he's open discussions with Microsoft, which he probably has. Hogue Law, which frankly, Hogue Law at this point is, I think, making more of a name for himself on YouTube by covering more and more video game related things over and over again. He is lambasting Sony for deceptive marketing on Horizon's free PS5 upgrade. He says the situation, quote, could present a possibility of a class action claim. Sony committed to offer players who purchase the PS4 version a free upgrade to the PS5 ones. So what's the complaint? Well, I think the complaint here is that Horizon Forbidden West for the PS5 was announced in June of 2020, and the PS4 version was only confirmed 3 months later, which still would have been well within the time that any pre-orders would have been available, I would say. So this kind of feels like an article from Video Games Chronicle talking about Hogue Law making a lot of nothing. Oh, okay, here I finally have gotten down to the core of it, and this has been something we've been saying. So there is some actual meat on this bone. You just had to dig 5 paragraphs down. You only get the free upgrade if you purchase the special edition. Nope. dual entitlement does not apply to standard or special editions. So you would have had to buy some kind of like ultra deluxe edition or deluxe edition. Yeah. Alright, well, I'm gonna leave this article, which is way longer than most Video Games Chronicle articles. And at a certain point, if Video Games Chronicle is just going to make articles by copying and pasting YouTubers' content, I'm gonna not really want to report on that so much. Sony has had a problem of being greedy, certainly, in the past, and particularly Sony of California has this growing problem of feeling greedy with the cross-platform upgrades. Which there's really no reason for it. It's fairly hard to buy a PlayStation 5. So there's really no reason not to just have those free upgrades. And in a lot of ways, it does just feel like Sony is losing its fan base through its own actions. Like, Microsoft has been stupid in the past and lost its fan base, but Microsoft is not really doing that much to hurt Sony. Sony fanboys are still out there, and they still love Sony, until they've just had enough of, like, kind of deceptive marketing and nonsense. Let's see if we can do this. Moving on, a Bioshock film is in the works at Netflix and Take-Two. We'd already talked about this. Previous efforts to make a film of adaptation reportedly failed over budgetary and rating concerns. Which, yeah, this is going to be basically a mature or adults-only film. It's very possibly, if it's going to go in theaters, might be an NC-17 film. And that might be one of the values of having a name like Bioshock on your film. But yeah, when you make this movie, just look here. You've got Mr. Bubbles, the Big Daddy. You've got the little sister. Those are iconic characters that have to have some involvement in the story, or you are going to be doomed from the start. And there's just a lot of story that happened in the game that people kind of forget about. And I would almost assume Netflix is trying to get people to forget about it, so they can make a shorter experience and not a three-hour movie. Take-Two might be more desperate than they seem also. Or this might just be more of a case of Take-Two is feeling somewhat confident with their Borderlands movie, which I think they're involved with that, the Borderlands movie. I don't see a reason why they wouldn't, since they own Borderlands in general. As an intellectual property, they own Borderlands. So maybe Borderlands is doing so well that they like how this is going, or that they're just betting the farm on movie adaptations. But I would say, in a lot of ways, just don't hold your breath on a Bioshock film. Don't hold your breath that it's going to be good, and don't hold your breath that it's ever going to come out. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says PlayStation Productions reveals a new animation for its film and TV shows. Which, is there a list of what they're showing here? Let's see. They're working on The Last of Us HBO TV series, Ghost of Tsushima movie, a Twisted Metal TV series, and several other projects not connected to Take-Two creating a Bioshock film. It's just the time in which a lot of people would announce things. So I wouldn't be surprised if these announcements bear little weight as far as actually having a chance of being anything of mention, and really are just getting announced because we are approaching the second quarter, or we're halfway through the first quarter of the year. Moving on, Elden Ring's PC system requirements have been revealed. Do we really need to check it? Minimum specifications: Windows 10, an i5 8400 or a Ryzen 3 3300X. 12 gigabytes of RAM is a fairly high amount. 1060s. At this point, I'm thinking about what will be needed for building a gaming PC in the next couple of years. In particular, I'm thinking about whether a 2060 would still be worth building with in 3 or 4 years with the video card shortage more than anything. DirectX 12, feature level 12.0, 60 gigabytes, and some kind of sound card. That's the minimum. The recommended is to go to Windows 11, have an i7, or at least a Ryzen 5 3600X, 16 gigs of RAM, and a 1070. Not a big difference really between a 1060 and a 1070. Like 3 gigabytes of video RAM versus 8 gigabytes of video RAM, so it's really not using video RAM as much as it probably should. And I guess Elden Ring is a single player game that's not expected to just constantly get more content, so I expect those system requirements won't change. Let's see. Nintendo is officially ceasing the 3DS and Wii U eShop purchases. You'll no longer be able to purchase digital games from March 2023, so you have a whole nother year. Although, at this point, I don't think too many people bought Wii U's and 3DS's. I guess are officially totally dead now. If you had a 3DS now would be like, I would say this is, you don't even have to wait till March 2023. I would say you could consider them abandonware right now. I would argue that they were probably abandonware a year ago, when Nintendo stopped putting any first party titles on the Wii U or the 3DS, which would have been at least a year ago, if not 2 or 3 years ago. I think you might even make a decent argument that they were abandonware the second that the Nintendo Switch came out. As far as what you personally believe abandonware is, legally, abandonware barely has any definition. But my point there is, you today, more than even yesterday, have more reason to potentially hack these to run old ROMs or new ROMs of 3DS games. 3DS games with the dual screen are kind of hard to emulate. So having a 3DS that can play 3DS games, ROMs, it's not the craziest thing. There's not really a good reason for Wii U games. In a lot of ways, I imagine the reason that the Wii U eShop has been around this long is because they were just slowly transferring or remaking everything that was released on the Wii or Wii U to Switch versions, with the most recent announcement being a improved version of Wii Sports. Moving on, a third Sonic movie and a live-action series is confirmed by Paramount. which the Sonic movie is mostly live action too, but Paramount clearly doubling down on the success they saw with the Sonic movie. It is just definitely going to be kind of funny to me when there's a new generation of people that really like Sonic, when personally I have never had any real love for Sonic as a Nintendo fanboy. But I will keep my mouth closed about that and let the new generation enjoy what they like. In a lot of ways, this new generation is just liking what previous generations liked. Apparently, like Pound Puppies, for instance, is back into fashion, from what I hear. Which that is definitely not something I would have thought would have happened. And they may be only in fashion for a small percentage of this new generation, but the fact that you can buy Pound Puppies for sale even is kind of shocking. Here we have another Video Games Chronicles story. Nintendo being Nintendo, forbidding Switch Sports playtesters from sharing info on social media. Which really, I don't think that means anything at all. Like, it would be very, very shocking for them to come out and bring out a game like this and it not play at least as good as Wii Sports. Like, I would be very shocked if anybody has anything critical to say about Switch Sports. Of course, don't go pre-order the game, wait for some actual reviews. I just assume that's Nintendo trying to control the messaging. Moving on, the first footage of Halo's Infinite Forge mode has seemingly appeared online, according to Video Games Chronicles. Check out that article if you're interested. The Witcher 3 director has formed a new studio for an Unreal Engine 5 RPG. Konrad Tomazinskiewicz, I suppose is how you pronounce that. He left CD Projekt Red last year after bullying accusations, which he denied. Well, that puts you in kind of a weird situation, certainly. Which of the two sides do you want to take here? If you want to take either side. Like, clearly the right move here would be to not take either side and see if this Witcher 3 director can make a new studio and hire people and work with new people to make a game that's good and well reviewed. Just wait till that point, and then maybe this game, which he's gonna make, which the company is called Rebel Wolves. The game isn't called Rebel Wolves. In a funny way, him forming his own company and making a story-driven RPG might do him a better favor than CD Projekt Red, which is still kind of having to deal with the Witcher author being involved, whereas he could just hire a writer for hire and own the narrative and own the story in the game from the beginning. So yeah, we will just have to wait 4 years from now, pretty much. It's almost guaranteed to be 4 years from now before they actually have the game released, and at that point we'll probably forget completely about any kind of bully accusations that were denied. At a certain point, if somebody accuses somebody of bullying and they deny it, I'm going to believe the denial, and frankly I'm going to mostly dismiss the accusation of bullying. Workplace bullying does happen, but also false accusations happen, and so without any evidence, you have to just believe the accused over the accuser, as silly as that sounds, and as controversial as that might be, because the narrative has constantly been always believe the accusers, and that has just created a cancel culture scenario where there's been proven false claims made. And the law has always said you're innocent until proven guilty, and I have to lean more towards that mentality. Certainly. And in a funny way, him leaving CD Projekt Red because he's being accused or treated badly, as most people at CD Projekt Red are being treated badly, on top of him being accused, does kind of fall into my same opinion as far as how long should you stick at a job and try and change that job versus just going and starting your own company. It definitely feels a lot more empowering when someone can just go and start their own company and leave CD Projekt Red, which is almost certainly a toxic work environment at some level. Moving on, a new Dying Light 2 patches fixes the death loop bug and adds a backup save system. I don't know what the death loop bug was, but I would imagine it's a scenario where you got some kind of autosave and then you die and then load that same autosave just to be killed again, which that's always a problem, and why even if you have an autosave game, you should probably make some backup safety saves every now and then, just in case you have to roll back to a previous version. I wish game saves had actual versioning in them, or at least had some scheduled backup autosaves, so it would like make an autosave every minute, every 10 minutes, every 20 minutes, every 30 minutes, every hour, every 2 hours, every day, every month, even if you're playing a game for a full month. And that way you could have like the last 3 hourly saves, you could have the last 3 daily saves, and you could have the last like 10-minute saves. Although every minute's probably too fast, every 10 minutes would be fine. If you had the last 10 minutes and then the last 3 hourlies, you would probably be fine for most games as far as a snapshotting system. Which, what I'm describing is exactly what you should set up for if you have a ZFS RAID arrays to make different snapshot version backups of the files. And then it's probably not really news, but the Xbox Series X is currently in stock at Microsoft UK. Let's see, we've got, I believe this is maybe a Disgaea game. Nope. It's just a Chinese anime girl game, RPG. Doesn't look particularly interesting. It's free, oddly, though. I don't know why you would make a free game, but I guess I say that every time. I never have an idea as why you would release a free game if it's single player, has no microtransactions. It caught my eye for half a second, but obviously I can't play it. Mavrede Morte looks like it is a sliding puzzle game with a Halloween theme and coming out in February, which is a little weird. Yeah, I don't think I generally would want to play a sliding game, and I definitely don't feel like I would want to bother with with playing one that is a Halloween themed game. So that's gonna be a no. Art of Destruction here. Looks like it's an asset flip game. Maybe a physics experiment. Destroying buildings. Take note how they have completely stopped talking about like procedurally generated physics-based destruction in buildings. It's just not something that's sold as a concept, whether you're using a cloud-based server or just in-game engine technology to do the environmental destruction. It, for the most part, is just not a good selling point. If anything, when they're talking about environmental destruction, you're probably trying to hide the fact that you have nothing new as far as an engine element to sell, and you're just selling the same type of game that would have been sold 5 years ago, which at a certain point, that's fine. Just say you've got a different characters, different story, and that this is going to be your standard Halo first-person shooter. Here we have a game that's I, woman, with a period in between each letter and woman. But as far as I can tell, it has no women in it or woman in it at all. I guess maybe this is a female character, but even in screenshot, they've got this arm and this mask over them, so you really couldn't tell. And in this top-down shooter perspective, nothing there tells me that this is a female by any means. So, sounds like somebody thought of an initialism and then decided to make a low-effort top-down twin-stick shooter. So that's obviously going to be no. Then we have a Monster Among Us, which I think very possibly is Japanese only. Or Chinese only. Early access Chinese only, so that's gotta be a no. Looks kinda interesting. Then we have another one that almost certainly is gonna be Chinese only as far as horror games. There is something I think to be said about seeing more Chinese horror games because they haven't really embraced that to the point where I would have kind of expected that there was some level of self-censorship happening as far as horror games from Chinese people. And maybe they've finally gotten past that, or maybe it's just that one developer is trying horror games. Either one could be true. Here we have a draw and guess game, which maybe connects to your phone online. It does kind of feel like this is a mobile phone game and they've just made a PC version, which isn't a terrible thought. Perhaps it shouldn't be $5.59 though. But yeah, this is one of those party games that I would need other people to play with, and your experience is going to drastically change based on just who you are playing with. Let's see. We need to hope this doesn't get countered or we're gonna lose. Here we have another RPG Maker looking game, although maybe it isn't actually RPG Maker. Again, probably not English supported, Chinese only. Ton of Chinese games. Here we have a game called Pick the Lock, which looks like a simplistic single screen timing mechanic. I don't know if this is... This really isn't how you would pick a lock. You wouldn't go back and forth like that, even if you were doing a dial lock and trying to decode the dial lock. It really goes to show, I think, a game like this really goes to show how there are just concepts that would be alright mini games inside a bigger standard first-person shooter type experience, but stand alone, they just really have no value. And that's definitely what I'd feel like here, is that this is basically a rhythm game or a clicker game. I guess it's not even really a clicker game, and that just is not good enough. We have Super Runner VR, which doesn't really feel like it has anything to do with running at all. It seems like there's just a whole bunch of other random things you can do. An infinite runner, or a running simulation game in VR, is practically impossible to make good. It's also fairly cheap for a VR game, because movement is either by controller or by waving your hands up and down, and that is not going to simulate running. As one of the advantages of the leg strap in the Nintendo Switch and putting a Joy-Con in the leg strap, is we really have not seen, or I don't think I've ever seen anybody make a leg strap for like an Oculus or a Valve a headset controller that could actually measure your walking up and down. Here we have a game called Liberate, which looks interesting. Looks like it's mostly a top-down hack and slash game, maybe with a little twin stick shooter. Lovecraftian version of the French Revolution. Interesting. Well, that is an interesting twist on two different genres. I'll put that on the fall list. We'll see what happens there. I'm doing better about not just surrendering and getting distracted. I'm not particularly doing that well as far as winning. Here we have a game on Steam, Hacker Simulation Free Trial, which is just a demo version of the Hacker Simulation game that I think I saw a couple days ago and dismissed. So I'll definitely dismiss the free trial. Then Akimos. Looks like it's just a bunch of blobs. An exploration shooter game about alchemy. Yeah, I don't buy that for a second. This definitely looks like this is just some asset flip nonsense. So I'm gonna say no to that. Shadow Madness looks like an old game, but it doesn't particularly look like an old game that has any relevancy to me. It probably is an old game because it's being published by Pico Interactive and developers apparently Crave. But I would have to say no to that again. Also, fairly expensive for an old game. Spelldrifter. Looks like it's a card-based positional placement game. I think I would probably say no to that. $15.99. Single player only. Hybrid tactical role-playing game and deck building game that features the best parts of both. Well, tactical RPGs are definitely not my bag. So I think I would have to say no to Spelldrifter. Also looking at all these screenshots, I'm not really seeing anything of interest there. Okay. see what happens there. We'll look at another game while they're thinking. Here we have a game called The Wilds. And every time I see a game like this, I want it to really succeed, but almost all of them fail. But I really have no choice. So I'll put this on the follow list and see if it ever comes out of early access, if people review it. Just looking at it from the beginning, having a single key to eat and just kind of this single life bar does kind of make it seem like you're maybe not going to do too much in the actual gameplay. But I'm not sure what you even really want to have done. You would kind of want to, says you search for food, water, and shelter, and fighting, and that would be about the only thing I imagine an animal, you would expect an animal to do in an animal simulator, which might also highlight the problems with making a game that's an animal simulator. Here we have a game on Steam called Kamikaze Veggies, which seems like it's maybe supposed to be like a Splatoon type game. It says you're solving puzzles, but I would have expected this would have been more a shooter. Maybe this is more of a like Pikmin game. I'm gonna put this on the fall list and just see. Yeah, I'll just see if it has something to it. Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any shooting in the game at all. And it's kind of cheap at $4.79. That might be a problem later on. It seems like it is kind of a platform puzzler. Here we have a game called Super Dungeon Maker, which was rated positively as a level editor game. I don't think there's a game here though. Sure, I suppose this is something that might be interesting to teach kids how to maybe design level design without bothering to teach them programming, which would be a different person's job. And if this was called Mario Maker, this would definitely have some relevancy. But if it was called Mario Maker, it also wouldn't be on Steam. And even the Mario Maker games kind of sucked. It's really gonna have to circle around the relevancy issue. If a lot of people got into this game and it became the next big Minecraft thing, then yes, it would be very relevant to get it. If it has less than 100 people ever at its peak, then making levels and sharing them with the community really wouldn't matter. But that means it needs to be on the follow list. So we'll leave it on the follow list. Next we have a game called Crown of Pain here, which is kind of a match 3 game with a dark fantasy element, although I'm not sure that there's a good reason for this interface. It seems like you're kind of just wasting a lot of space on the side, wasting a lot of space up here at the top, and keeping your match 3 grid fairly small, which maybe making the match 3 grid small is a smart move. Looking between all of these visuals, though, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of variety here. $4.49 might be a little too expensive. I'll give it a chance though and put it on the follow list. Some of these Gematsu articles we may have already talked about. A mystery horror RPG remaster called Pocket Mirror Golden Nitram has been announced for PC. It's not a game I've heard of before. It does look like it very possibly could have been an RPG Maker game that is now getting a bit of a remaster and a polish to it. Just hope this works. See if this plays. See, I don't even know if I have the blur enabled at the moment. Yeah, it looks like a horror RPG. Looks like something I haven't seen before. See, I may just have the resolution so low. It's just blurry in general. Guess we could replay the video and see what it looks like then. I still think I have the blur. Maybe I turned off the blur to watch a video, and I may very well have turned off the blur settings or changed the blur settings. But whatever, we'll leave it at what it is at. Yeah, I wish I could get rid of the blur completely, but might as well establish that as the standard thing, standard way of doing things for a while. Moving on, Breakers Collection PC closed beta test is set for February 18th to the 21st. If that interests you, check out this Gematsu article. We had already kind of talked about this. Platinum Games open to acquisition talks as long as the freedom is respected. And apparently CEO finds it weird that the Japanese companies are passive about mergers. RPG Maker Unite has been announced for PC. It is a role-playing game creation tool series. So it's a new RPG Maker version. See if this works. This guy's taking forever. I've already activated this effect, so it's still gonna kill everything. Didn't kill quite everything, but we'll see. So here it says RPG Maker Unite, currently slated for 2022 release, will leverage its highly popular Unity and aim to make RPG game development more intuitive and fun for everyone than ever. Making games probably shouldn't be fun, and work probably shouldn't be fun ever, because there will always be times when work isn't fun, so if you're expecting it to always be fun, you're being unrealistic. Arguably, people that use RPG Maker are unrealistic in the first place. RPG Maker Unite will retain its unique code -equals list nature that opens up the dream for more people wishing to become developers. If you're not writing code, you're not a developer in my book, frankly. And this is the problem with RPG Maker in general as a concept, and RPG Maker as a product should probably just be straight up blacklisted from Steam, as the individual product shouldn't be available for purchase on Steam, and any game that is made using RPG Maker should be considered highly unwelcome at Steam if they're going to do any level of curation, which they are already doing some level of curation. We know they are. It's just that their level of curation is basically only centered around the idea of avoiding adult content on Steam. And yeah, I don't think too many gamers would complain if every single RPG Maker game was removed from sale on Steam. Moving on, ZeniMax Asia and Tango Gameworks kind of both announced Hero Dice for iOS and Android. Doesn't seem like there's any more details on this Gematsu article. CyberConnect 2 25th anniversary visual and music video apparently was released as a music video. This would be the .hack/developer closing to the 25th anniversary, although the pictures being shown here are not having anything to do with .hack. This is all I assume CyberConnect. These characters down here are .hack characters drawn in a chibi fashion as kind of an afterthought. See if we can turn this around and win. I severely doubt that any new .hack game would actually ever get released. I could see remasters, and that's about it. Let's see. What is this guy doing? Just keeping himself alive, I guess. We already talked about the Elden Ring PC requirements, so we don't need to cover that. We already talked about Xbox Game Pass, so we don't need to talk about that. Strangers in Paradise Final Fantasy Origin details Merilith, the Lufinians, expert jobs, and new locations. If you're interested in Final Fantasy Strangers in Paradise, this is quite the wild outfit. I guess check out this article. Yeah, I've been using a heating pad on my neck and wearing this neck pillow, and still 2 hours and 49 minutes into the stream I'm feeling a little bit of a twinge, but it's not as bad. The classic racing game Moto Rotor MC is coming to the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch on February 25th. Oddly, not on Steam or PC. It was first launched on Super CD-ROM in 1992. What's funny is it's, I guess, a racing game by 1992 standards, but by modern standards, this is not what you expect when you see a racing game. It seems so odd that you wouldn't bother to bring out a PC port of it, but it also does seem like it's kind of a Japanese exclusive, so that would kind of make sense too. 13 Sentinels Aegis Ream for Switch, Calamities trailer, and physical edition pre-order bonus announced. I'm not 100% sure if 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim is the newest game in the 13 Sentinels series, or if it is the first game. I think it might be the first game in a potential series, but arguably maybe it's not. This is the game with the 13 different perspectives on from 13 different people, and it's really just this wild and crazy experience that you have to really pay attention to. Well, if he does this, he'll win. A game called Dark Deity for the Switch launches March 17th. It does not look particularly interesting. Just from this one screenshot, it doesn't look interesting. We had already talked about the Cyberpunk upgrades a lot of time. We already talked about Bioshock films. We've already talked about Sonic the Hedgehog. Genshin Impact version 2.5 update is now available. I assume that's probably still somewhat relevant. We already talked about the Wii U 3DS shops ending on March 2023. A game called Nimbus Infinity for PC is now available in early access, which just looks like a mech game. A play exclamation point, play exclamation point, play exclamation point live stream has been announced for Babylon's Fall, Strangers in Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin, and Ghostwire Tokyo. So they're still advertising Ghostwire Tokyo, so I assume it's maybe not out yet. Puzzle and Dragons for Nintendo Switch Edition has been announced, which I'm actually a little surprised Puzzle and Dragons hasn't already come out on the Switch. I don't know if I'd really want kids, though, to get obsessed with Puzzles and Dragons if I recall what it was as a game, because it kind of is a gotcha match 3 game. Although maybe there's not going to be any microtransactions in the Nintendo Switch one, so it might be kind of a great way to get kids to waste their screen time. Although, with the whole concept of screen time, I'd rather my kids theoretically play better games instead of playing something like Puzzles and Dragons, which is just a mobile time waster. It's a game you'd play on the toilet or waiting in line, even though it very possibly is one of the better match 3 games. The Famitsu review scores for issue 1733. They give Atelier Sophie, The Alchemist of Mysterious Dream, 32 out of 40. Life is Strange True Colors gets 35 out of 40. Interesting. Life is Strange True Colors is the new Life is Strange game, though not to be confused with the Life is Strange remaster. So that I don't know how good that story really is. I'd be very surprised if the Life is Strange remaster deserved a 35 out of 40. And then Pokemon Legends Arceus, which I assume there's only one Pokemon Legends Arceus and not 2 different versions of it, which that in itself might be groundbreaking if they've just established that going forward, Pokemon games are not going to be sold as half products. But yeah, they're giving Pokemon Legends Arceus a 38 out of 40, which only a few games have ever gotten a 40 out of 40 from Famitsu, and even getting 3 10s is extremely rare. Getting 2 10s and 2 9s is pretty great. Most review scores tend to linger between 30 and 32 as far as the reviews go. The 1990s arcade platformer revival Snow Brothers Special has been announced for Switch. I remember playing Snow Brothers when I was a kid. It was probably a game I rented and don't think I really owned. But this kind of doesn't really feel like what the original Snow Brothers are, which is probably a good move because the original Snow Brothers as a game is probably not worth reviving. Although you really have to question whether there's any reason other than some tiny amount of nostalgia to bring back Snow Brothers as a game. It seems fairly ridiculous. They may very well be running out of ideas. Here we have a game on Steam called Arctico, which looks like it is a dog sledding, kayaking, and parachuting game. Base camp, open world survival game. So in a funny way, it's kind of like the ocean games, but let's put you in an icy location. I suppose there's an idea there. So I'll give that a follow. I think at this point I want to stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel though. It would take me a few victories to get up to level 20, and I'm sure when I get level 20 I'll get a reward there. I still need to play one more trap card, I guess. But I could also just put that off. It does kind of seem like you're better off just getting rid of all of the things possible as soon as possible. And then I need to play 3 solo mode things. Meanwhile, over here we are just slowly making progress on something. We have won 202 ranked duels, so that gives me a trophy icon, which we might play with that. Sure. Go from being an upstart goblin to being a trophy. You can see there's quite a lot of these that I've unlocked in solo mode, and one that I think I may have purchased. Maybe I purchased more than one. And then see icon frame 1, 2, 3, 4. Change that frame. I don't think I've gotten any let's go from beginner duelist to casual. Then decent number of mates. Not a lot of monster art though. Alright, let's cover the rest of this news because I'm going 3 hours here. Here we have a game called Burger Patrol, which looks like it is basically a Klax game, kind of Tetris. Maybe there's a different game that you would use instead of Klax as a reference, probably. it's a Tetris derivative. I'd leave it at that. $2.69 English. That's going to be a no. Here we have Dealer's Life 2, which was rated very positively already. This is already on the follow list. And Dealer's Life 1 made it to the wish list. This is the trading management game with some joke items. Must have come out of early access, so I'll put that on the wish list. Mystery of the Fountain in Space. Does not particularly look like anything of interest. Free. Several languages there. English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Might of the Stones. Doesn't look like anything, so that's going to be a no. A collector's edition from Big Fish Games, so it's obviously a hidden object game, so that's obviously going to be a no. Draft Day Sports College Football is just a football management game, so not my style of game. Also incredibly expensive, so that's going to be a no. Coin Invaders looks like a Space Invaders game. I don't even see why coins would be involved. Save Bitcoin from cryptocurrency madness. So basically it's a meme game in my book, so that's going to be a no. Into Drive. There might be something to this, so I think I need to put this on the follow list. Yeah. Mushy. Looks like an asset flip shooter. Free to play, so online PvP only. That's going to be a no. Yatsumi God Reunion. Looks like it is a visual novel with maybe some adventure puzzle elements. Yeah. Trying to find out if this is the first story in the series. Full Japanese audio, $25.49. That definitely highlights that it looks like there's some actual polish here. Let's see, let's go ahead and reload. Let's see if we can make sure that's on the follow list. Seems like it worked. Take it off the follow list and put it back on the follow list. Escape Adventure is how it's being described by this trailer. Okay, we'll see how the reviews go with that. In contrast to that, here we have what looks like a mobile phone visual novel, probably Chinese if I was to guess. Nope, Japanese. I was wrong. I haven't seen haven't really seen a lot of Japanese mobile games trying to be ported to PC when there probably is some room for that to happen. It just hasn't happened yet. We have a game called Holy Purge, fighting demons. It feels a little too asset flippy for me to really believe in it. Plus, I'm not sure I really want to play as like some kind of Spanish Inquisitor, even if demons are real. Like, there's just a lot of baggage around something like that. I'd prefer a story more like Doom, where demons are real, but they really have nothing to do with like a biblical demon, and they're just basically space aliens, and you're fighting as a space marine. I'm gonna say no to that. Nimbus Infinity here is already mixed at 50%. I'll be generous and give it a follow, but really I should just ignore it. And for some reason they're comparing that to Dead Space 2 and Fallout 3 Game of the Year edition, which I don't know what elements would overlap between those two. We have VR Return the Middle Ages, fully interactive, which looks just like it's a kind of asset flip experience game. They're calling it a leisure tour game. $2.99, several languages allegedly. Let's get the rest of these Komatsu articles. Daymare 1994 Sandcastle PC demo launches February 21st, which Daymare 1994 Sandcastle, it's not a game I've recognized. I've heard of a game called Daymare, and I almost wonder if this is a sequel to it. It's a prequel. So what's the other game? I guess we'll look at the developer. Yeah. Daymare 1998. So it's a prequel 4 years before there, and it does look like it's a fairly decent game. It does kind of put you in a weird position because that, like, chronologically you'd want to kind of go through the games in chronological order, but when the prequel is actually told or made in any art form, you're supposed to play the games or experience the story in the order in which it was released. At least for most cases that's the case. There might be a few instances where it actually does make sense to watch a prequel first. Like, I think The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as a story came out before The Magician's Nephew, which is chronologically the first game or prequel. And there's some arguments as far as that whole book series, what reading order you should use, but that's kind of the only people that argue that. Star Wars fans argue that you should watch 4, 5, and 6 and maybe not watch the 1, 2, and 3 movies at all. But if you are going to watch them, probably watch them after the fact. I don't think any real Star Wars fans argue that you should just watch them all in order. And with 7, 8, 9, I'm not sure what the attitude is really as far as watching different versions of what the watching order or which movies are worth watching in Star Wars. Star Trek fans argue that half of their Star Trek movies shouldn't be watched at all, which is a different situation. Moving on, Spellforce 3 Reforced, not Reforced, I guess, instead of Reforged or Remastered, is coming out to basically everything on June 7th now. Another delay for the console version, it says. Which, okay. Delays at this point are kind of standard. And then here we have the former Witcher 3 Wild Hunt and Cyberpunk 2077 staff have established a new studio, Rebel Wolves. This is written with a little bit different kind of tone and narrative. It's not just that one person has left, like this Conrad. It's not just that he left. In this story, they're saying he left and several other people moved over. Although I'm not sure I see a list of anybody else that moved over with him. So, in one way, you can do some yellow journalism and say it was just Conrad. He left, he took his toys and went to play in a different sandbox, or took his toys home to play with them by himself. Or in a different way, you could say it is that he left and at least 2 or 3 other people left, which would be about the average number to form a new company. Like, I don't think too many people would think, I'm going to go form a new company and not at least have a couple of people that work under them or co-workers that they would at least consider giving the offer to. In a lot of ways, that may very well be what happened with Nextlander, because we never really got any kind of explanation there as far as why 3 of the people at Giant Bomb East all left to go make their own YouTube channel and basically changed nothing else. And Giant Bomb, although it has been making some changes, really hasn't changed that much from the lack of content it was making before then. Although I also wouldn't be surprised if they just said, we're going to demote you and make you freelance writers instead of paid staff, and that's why they left, because they just weren't willing to take the demotion, which is fair enough. Moving on, the Gematsu article here, No Man's Sky Sentinels update is now available. Sam & Max, this time it's virtual, for PlayStation VR, launches February 23rd. I wonder if there's any way that this game could ever be released without requiring VR. Like, or is it just so integrated? Kind of doesn't matter. Here you can see it's this is mixed reviewed and requires VR. That's although sometimes they come down into these descriptions and say you can actually play it. What's funny here is that this is so poorly reviewed, and then they're pointing out that this was from the creator Steve Purcell and several other people, and it might just point out that Sam & Max was only funny for the first 2 games, and Steve Purcell has not just matured his comedy or adapted his comedy for a new generation, and so he's no longer really that funny. Moving on, A Musical Story launches March 2nd for the PS5 and PS4, March 3rd for the Switch, March 4th for Xbox Series 1, PC, and iOS, which that is a really crazy staggered release, I would say. This is rated M for mature for having sex and nudity, which is not particularly what I was expecting to see. Yeah, I'm not sure if this game is an actual game or if this isn't just going to be kind of a montage of images and audio, probably a lot of audio. Yeah, they're saying it's a rhythm game, so probably wouldn't be able to play it because of copyright reasons. But also I probably wouldn't be able to play it because I'm just tone deaf. Moving on, the side-scrolling beat-em-up Final Vendetta has been announced for basically everything, due out in May. Which I assume that this would be another in the Final Fight series. If not, it definitely looks like it's a parody of the Final Fight series. You've got the chicken, even. Got some new looking characters, which maybe makes it a parody. Who is making this, though? Because if this is like Konami or Capcom, then it's part of the Final Fight series. Let's check out the Steam page. But if it's being made by some no-name people, Numbscale Games, Bitmap Bureau. Yeah, I think this is a pure parody. And honestly, not a terrible thought. There's this custom engine out there specifically to make like mods and new versions of Final Fight games, which kind of highlights that there's a fandom there and that people are interested in making a few of these. And if this is well received, I'm going to put this on the follow list early, then that gives me kind of a great excuse to get some of the previous Final Fantasy, not Final Fantasy games, but Final Fight games, and release them, spotlight them without having to actually play them. Also have Xenocrisis here as like a parody of an old top-down shooter game. Okay. So at least I kind of know where Bitmap Bureau is coming from. A game called Bullet Hell, first-person shooter Scathe. No, it is a Bullet Hell first-person shooter called Scathe. Launches in 2022 for PlayStation and Xboxes and PCs. No Switches. Which, yeah, you'd have to be somewhat careful about a game like this because it might just be more Doom Eternal more than you might be willing to actually play. Or maybe not. Maybe the Doom Remaster and Doom Eternal are just opening a new generation to the idea of Doom clones, and we'll start to see more and more of that kind of experience. Yeah, this may just be the way forward. Again, I'll be premature and put it on the follow list. Yep, this may just be the way forward to first-person shooters, and that we're going to have more Doom-style, Doom reboot-style first-person shooters, and less Halo-style first-person shooters. And then our battle has just begun. Episode 2 has been announced for Switch and PC, which, looking at the cleavage and the big boobs, I assume this is a visual novel of some interest. Let's see. Risking family friendliness, I will click on this Steam page and scroll away. Then just make sure all the screenshots are at least YouTube family friendly. And they seem to be. Yep, it's a visual novel dating sim game. Seems like that's all there is to it. Doesn't seem like it has any dungeon crawling or anything else. So we can leave that off the follow list. Here we have a game called Home Behind. Seems to be half tower defense from this screenshot, but then seems like there's a lot of RPG and other gameplay mechanics too. It's rated very positively. And Home Behind 1 is already on my wish list. So I guess this has left early access, and I'll add this to the wish list. It meets all the requirements. Now, I don't think these are follow list games. I just think that happened to be on the follow list. Here we have a game called Rolling Valley, which looks uninteresting. So say no to that. Here we have a game called Village Blade, which looks uninteresting too, so we'll say no to that. A little expensive at $11.99. Here we have a Cook Serve Delicious style game, a cooking time management game. Let's see, so that's going to be a no. We have about 20 more tabs. Here we have Tetris Ray Tracing version. I just don't think that this looks like a particularly good Tetris game. Using assets of pipes to make a Tetris game with ray tracing, and adding ray tracing to Tetris, but then drastically changing what that would look like, doesn't make sense. If you were going to turn ray tracing on for something like Tetris, you would have these bright, glowy shapes that just reflected and looked amazing. You could do a much better game around the idea of a Tetris ray tracing. This is just bad, so that's obviously going to be a no. Here we have a visual novel called Crown's Delights Deli, which I don't know if there's really a game here. You can choose to talk in English, AAVE. I have no idea what that is. American, Asian, something? Or Spanish. So it's almost like tone changing or speaking different languages to different customers, which is a certain level. I'm sure people would be upset with people tone changing or speaking different languages, but actually as a shop owner, it totally makes sense to speak to people in the language they are most easily set to, or most likely to understand, assuming you can actually speak those languages. I don't think there's really a game here, though. This just feels woke on top of wokeness. Just look in the background of the screenshot there, and then look at the pandering here on this next screenshot. Yeah, this feels just like woke pandering to me. Next we have a game called Taxi Driver the Simulation, which looks like it's just probably an asset flip game of no interest. Nobody really wants to play a taxi driver. You want to play something like Crazy Taxi, where you're rushing and racing, not driving safely and managing congested traffic. Orc vs. Undead here looks uninteresting, so we'll say no to that. Mystic Cards doesn't really feel visually polished enough for anything of interest. It seems like it's also a collection of different like mysticism style things all over the place. If visually this looked better, I might have considered it, but I definitely wouldn't have considered it at $44.99. That's insanely high. Here we have a game called Pirate Jam, probably not related to the actual event Pirate Jam, which I assume has been canceled like everything else. As a game, it looks uninteresting. Free to play English. Here we have Dimension Dash, which looks like total garbage, so we can say no to that very quickly. Here we have Duel, which I think is a asset flip game, and now that I realize it's from Sock Pop Collective, I can immediately dismiss it, since Sock Pop Collective floods Steam with garbage games. The Sinking Structure, Cleone, and the Lost Child. I don't know if there's really a game here, or if this is more of just a kind of asset flip. I wouldn't even really call this an asset flip. What I think this is this is an animator trying to tell a story using video games for no good reason. And yeah, you would probably, if this is supposed to be some kind of mystical floating mother-like creature, you would need to put more animation here. The child character needs more animation here. This really just does not feel like something that should be on Steam, even free. though. Yeah, this feels like this is some student project or something that shouldn't be out. There. Notice how they're putting pictures to show you how to control it. So no instructions in the game, I assume. Next we have a game here called Drowning, which looks like absolute garbage. So no to that. We now are at the GameDeveloper.com articles. We had already talked about the new Bioshock adaptation. The last one failed, remember? And we'd already talked about the Cyberpunk Next Generation upgrade, including a 5-hour free trial. 5-hour free trials is interesting, certainly. For those types of games, maybe that should be the new standard. And hopefully that might be the one thing that could be Cyberpunk's legacy, is just establishing a new standard of 5-hour free trials for long-running RPG games. Paramount greenlighting more Halo and Sonic content. This might be the first we'd heard about Halo content being greenlit also. We'd already talked about... This is a funny spin version of this. Nintendo announces 3DS and Wii U eShop closures, gets defensive about game preservation. In a QA section that's since been deleted, Nintendo says it has no plan to offer classic content outside of Switch Online memberships. Which, yeah, there's definitely frustration I've seen on Reddit, and I could certainly understand people having frustration with Nintendo, with them really only pretending like they are going to let people preserve / play old games via the Nintendo membership service, and that really is just pretense, because there's probably thousands, if not tens of thousands, of games that will never come to the Nintendo shop, and there's no other option but to use ROMs. Whether it's pirated ROMs or not, who cares at this point? You've left you with no other option, and pretty much all 3DS games in my book, all Wii U games in my book, are abandonware. Will be abandonware maybe in March if you want to really get pedantic about it, but I would say they already are abandoned. I guess it's an interesting theological question. If you told the child, I'm going to kick you out a year from now, have you abandoned the child now or a year from then? Then I think legally you've psychologically abused the child now, and you've made known your intention to abandon the child a year from now. Might be the legal stance there. Moving on, the Haven Studios co-founder Sebastian Duel has departed after 10 months, which that is not a good picture for Haven Studios. He previously served as general manager of Stadia Games and Entertainment, so he's been bouncing around from failure to kind of failure. Haven Studios may very well be in trouble. Apparently it's a Sony-backed developer. Isn't the other co-founder one of the few female CEOs in the video game industry? Haven is currently working on a new original franchise for the PlayStation, but to lose your co-founder in less than 10 months does not spell good news, and I guess we have to leave it at that. This is not really news to talk about. Itch's next Creator Day is right around the corner. Niantic and Sony are partnering together to develop auditory augmented reality technology. Ingress will be the first Niantic title to get the immersive augmented reality audio treatment. I have seen something about this, like donut being added to Sony headphones, and I'm not 100% sure what the whole deal about this is. For some people's earlobes, this probably helps things stay more in your ear and not fall out, because I imagine that is a problem where you're having, some people are just having to cram things in their ears, and just like wedge things in their ears so that it doesn't fall out. But having this donut hole, unless there's like a microphone here, which I'd assume the microphone is this here, I don't know what that is going to be. Arguably, an augmented reality hearing aid mix might be very useful for a lot of people out there. There's definitely a lot of people that need hearing aids, or just a little bit of amplification. And for people that don't need that, perhaps augmented reality would make sense. But you'd have to really program around it, find problems that you can create, then solve yourself. I could understand hearing an augmented reality headphones and hearing a song and then having it tell you what song you're listening to, but that would also disrupt the song, so it'd have to kind of wait after that. I could see something like a Siri type assistant in earbuds without it directly connecting to a phone, but without it having a phone connection, it really couldn't do too much as far as answering or changing settings on online devices, as far as like home automation. I don't know what else you really could do with it. If it is just all going to be video games where all things like zombie run apps sound more realistic, I don't know if people really want that. Or if it somehow integrates the outside noise in some way to make music sound better, I don't know how you could do that either. That seems impossible. That at best it would just be noise reduction, not augmented reality. Moving on, we had already talked about Rebel Wolves being formed, so that's the last game, developer.com game. Here we have a match 3 game on the fall list, which we can say no to. And then we have a game called Mundane here, hand-drawn psychological horror, which is overwhelmingly positive. Is it out of early access? Yes. Was there any other problems? No. So we can put that on the wish list. Then we have Mum Master, which is kind of a tower defense mummy game. I was probably attracted to the mummy, and that's why I put this on the follow list. I don't know though if there's relevance here. I think I'm gonna leave this on the follow list and just think about it. Like, my guess is there probably is no reason to really put that on the wish list, but maybe if I'm looking for a really silly tower defense match 3 game, I might go in that direction. That definitely is one of those games where it's more lewd, so I'd almost feel like people would have to friend me on Steam and gift me that game so I could cover it and then potentially have all of the footage not allowed on YouTube if it got really, really explicit. This MTB Dirt doesn't quite have enough polish to it. That being said, there is a need for just a dirt biking kind of racetrack game out there. So still early access, so I'll give it some more time. Mr. Maze is from Screen 7. And it really doesn't have a justification for me to play it other than the fact that it's, I believe, from the same developer as the Cat Lady. Well, no, it isn't. It's from the publisher of the Cat Lady. Which, yeah. I don't need to be ridiculous then. Take that off the follow list. I don't need to play everything from Screen 7, particularly when half of what Screen 7 has put out is garbage. Next, we have another game that needs more time. Then Chronicle of Innsmouth Mountains of Madness is a Lovecraftian point-and-click adventure. It has enough relevancy. It's not in early access. Chronicle of Innsmouth is the first one. So this is a sequel. It's got full voice acting, it claims. Put that on the wish list. That might be kind of the best way to do a Lovecraftian story. Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord is early access, so we'll leave it at that. I also don't think I have played Mountain Blade 1. Don't think I want to play Mountain Blade 1. So what I'm going to do is put Mountain Blade 1 on the fall list. Come out here. Remove the sequel. That's not what I meant to click on. Remove Mountain Blade 2 as a concept and think about the first one. I could kind of see maybe getting into this, but I would need a big break from like Fallout 3 before I could get into this. Motorcycle Mechanic Simulator 2021. I hate when games have dates in their name. But yeah, this is positive. It's kind of edging there to just mostly positive. And it's not in early access, so we'll put that in. We have 2 more tabs. Now, Motherland is a walking simulator horror game. I think we can say no to this. This is probably just an asset flip horror game. Looking specifically at the description here. And then Mothered, a role-playing horror game, needs a little bit more time. Alright, and let's see, 57 new tweets. We've been going 3 hours and 40 minutes already, so I think what I want to do here, instead of having me scroll down my main Twitter feed and looking for new news, is just to assume that there is no new news worth really mentioning, and as such we can just call the stream. So that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me even further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.